involved in this process for a long time. We started way back in 2008 with the idea of updating the North Rainier neighborhood plan, which was at that time, oh gosh, about coming up on 10 years old. And we also recognized the arrival of light rail in the North Rainier neighborhood meant that it was probably an opportune time to update that plan, recognizing the changes that were happening. For those of you who aren't familiar with the boundaries of the North Rainier urban village, I will outline those for you right now. This is my handy map. I think most of you can see. It's the purple area here, and it's defined by I-90 right along the top. It kind of parallels Rainier right down through here. There's the Mount Baker light rail station, and the kind of the southern end of the urban village.
And what's the southern end?
Is Dakota. You can kind of see that it kind of winds down there to the bottom. This area that's hatched right here is the light rail station area overlay, and that really was the focus of our update. Taking the big step backwards, in the next 25 years, Seattle is expected to grow by another 180,000 folks. And we recognize that if all those people bring a car or two, we are doomed. Our traffic will be vastly worse. Our environmental quality will be vastly worse. So it is the policy of the city to link high-capacity transit with higher density neighborhoods. And that's certainly been the urban village strategy going way back last couple of decades. And the North Rainier urban village was an area that was identified as a part of the city that could accommodate additional growth, both residential growth, and this is an important point, this is a hub urban village, so there's also an expectation of employment growth. So within this area, we are anticipating additional growth, both residential and job, employment and residential. And I think the important point about this, and it goes back to the early concept behind the urban villages, is that there are some parts of the city that will expect to accommodate additional growth, and others, especially a lot of the single-family neighborhoods, where we're going to leave those intact. So it's this kind of recognition that some areas are going to stay the same, but some areas are going to see increased growth. So we had a huge outreach process, as I say, going back to 2008. A lot of conversation with neighbors, a lot of friends I see here today were involved in that process. I mean, this is slow even by Seattle standards. What are we at, 2013? But coming out of that big outreach and neighborhood process, we developed this document, which attempted to capture, and I've actually brought a bunch of these. So why don't I just pass these out? Pass it this way. Pass it this way. Capture some of the key themes, key interests of the community, of the neighborhood. And a central one that we heard loud and clear was wanting this portion of Rainier, and we're really talking about the intersection of Rainier and MLK, Martin Luther King. That area around the station to be much more walkable, be much more livable, and be much more vital. And most of you know it, it's particularly car-centered, car-focused. It's not an especially walkable place. It's hard to get from the light rail station to the transit center. So that was a key goal. Recognizing that we also have an expectation of greater residential and employment density in this area. That's a kind of a city goal. We developed this document which kind of lays out community goals, objectives, desires for the neighborhood. It also took a look at a variety of potential zoning and land use changes so that folks could assess the positives and negatives of those options. And coming out of that, I'm going to develop this, what we call urban design framework, which is really a cookbook, the recipe for how we can achieve the goals that we outlined planning process. Now, I don't have many copies of this. It's available online if you'd like to take a look. I'll pass one around, but there's, as I say, it's easily accessible online. And again, that really talked about how we can make this area more walkable, what are the objectives, how can we improve conditions for people to live and work and have access to transit. Again, particularly in this hatched area right here. Another element that came out of that planning work, both the general neighborhood plan update and the urban design framework, were some zoning recommendations. And so we had a lot of discussion. I know many of you have been involved in that over the years. And this is the recommendation ultimately that the department came up with, which is, again, focused right on the station area. There's the light rail station right there. To do some height increases, some density increases, again, just proximate to the station, with an easy walking distance of the station. So the blue bits we're taking, and I need to get my glasses out here, it's been a while since I've looked at this diagram. The blue bits are going from roughly 3-story heights as they are today. The recommendation is to go to 55, which is 5 stories for commercial, and 75 stories for residential. And then in this orange area, we had proposed going from the existing 6-story height limit to about a 8-story height limit, just again approximate to the station. The one kind of big piece and big gesture here was looking at the Lowe's site. Now again, we don't have control over the land, and we're not working with any active developers, but we're recognizing that this 13-acre site at some point in the future may redevelop, and when it does, we want to make sure that we take advantage of that opportunity. We are proposing 125-foot height in this one area. Also, the fact that if you know the site, it's kind of in a bowl. It's like on the 20-foot drop area. So we figured this area, this one piece, could take some additional height. Now, that's high. That's 12 stories. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to make sure it was a good fit with the neighborhood. We're building into our land use code recommendations what we call upper level setbacks, or so along, you don't get the canyon effect on Rainier. You've got a number of stories at the street that sets back.
No other
likewise,
neighborhoods
what's that?
No other neighborhoods have 12-foot or 12-story.
Actually, that's not true. A lot of neighborhoods do.
Which one?
Roosevelt does now. Northgate neighborhood does. And of course, our downtown neighborhoods have that kind of height. South Lake Union obviously is height. And I think that's an important consideration too. The recommendation came from the neighborhood to change to an SM zone, which is this zone we've used in South Lake Union, which really has produced a very walkable, very successful, very vital neighborhood. And that's
what's SM stand for?
It's Seattle Mixed. And the notion is it's a mixed use that can accommodate both commercial as well as residential. It can accommodate institutions, if you want a school, but it also matches the existing zoning. We've got the University Laundry here and Pepsi. It really is a broad range of uses. And so, again, recognizing this is a hub urban village, we're hoping to see, and I think the neighborhood has certainly endorsed more employment here, and if that opportunity were to come about, we wanted to take full advantage of it. Obviously, we've had a lot of height on the books for a long time, and we haven't seen a lot happen in the last 20 years. Adding a little bit more probably will not add. I mean, I'm not sure we'll see a huge takeoff. At the same time, this is a very desirable, I think, neighborhood, and as it transforms, you're just minutes away from downtown on the lake. So that's kind of the background. I think the zoning piece is actually just a small, what I'd say is necessary but not sufficient in terms of what it takes to transform, again, what most people would like to see as a different environment. The big news is on all of this, and this is breaking, is that the city council will be taking up these recommendations. They've been coming and hawing over the last 6 months or so, but they are going to be taking up these recommendations on December 20th, just a month from today. So you've got comments, you've got issues, please do contact your council members. They decided to move on this finally. Again, we've been 5 years into this process. But as I say, that's just the beginning. Zoning changes are part of the solution, but then once these are adopted, we'll be following up with neighborhood-specific design guidelines, which we think are an important part of ensuring that the design we have for this neighborhood really does fit and make sure that these projects are well integrated and meet the needs of the neighborhood. So that'll be the next step as soon as we have council knowledge. Yeah, that's it for me. Questions? Yeah.
I'm kind of concerned whether you are developing your plan to suit the neighborhood, or are you, or is it vice versa? I mean, are you doing all these things for your plan? I mean, what's good for the neighborhood? The neighborhood is a very home kind of residential kind of neighborhood. A 12-story building is awfully big. You know, it's I don't care what it has. That's awfully big, so it seems like I can't see that the neighborhood is clamoring and saying, we want 12-foot buildings, we want 12-foot buildings.
You're raising a very good point. We are working here to meld two objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Neighborhood objectives, which are really important, and they really have influenced our plan. But to be perfectly candid, we have the city objectives too. We need to accommodate 180,000 people in the city somehow. We want to do it well, we want to do it with grace, we want to do it thoughtfully, we want to integrate good land use policy with good transportation policy. That is an obligation that we have at the city
Well,
level.
a couple more floors is not, if you can cut down the floors and it still accommodate people.
Well, then, you're true, but then it's harder because then you've got to spread that density out into the single-family neighborhoods. And that is something that we heard crystal clear that people did not want their single-family zoning changed. And so this...
Well, so now it's a threat. It's either...
Well, it's trying to come up with a good solution, and hopefully we can all reason together on this. This seemed like a better arrangement than having a kind of lower density, but in a more spread out configuration.
It seems like it's already a done deal. You know.
Well, this zoning recommendation has gone through the environmental process. It was not challenged legally, so it is moving. It is very much moving forward. It's been a 5-year process. We're at the very end of the zoning piece. So, again, I think it was the best compromise we could come up with. But I think the onus is very much on us to make sure that the design guidelines ensure that this is all a good fit. Yeah.
So, I have a general question of, it looks really nice in the pictures. I walk Light Rail Station and I walk that area every single day. I personally, and I live in a single family home in my backyard, and I'd love to see this happen, honestly.
Yeah.
But how realistic and how far away are we looking to get that vibrant urban feel where you can walk on Rainier and McClellan and not feel like you're in danger of your life because of cars?
I'm in the set the table business, and so my job is to set the table, but I can't necessarily ensure that things take off. Certainly in places like South Lake Union, we set the table, and it took off. But are the conditions here the same? No, not really. At the same time, it's a close-in neighborhood, it's a desirable place, it borders some really terrific residential neighborhoods. And we don't have, for example, 13-acre sites like the Lowe's site pretty much anywhere else in the city. So there's opportunity here, but to the degree that we can say that something's going to happen immediately, who knows? But we do see things like the artist studio space. I think that's an important first step, and it's the kind of catalyst that would potentially be attractive to more. So that's just my personal sense.
Yeah, in terms of crossing Rainier, like between the bus station and the light rail, it's really, really busy there. And one of the things I've noticed is I'm often walk along MLK, and with that nice median in the middle. It makes it wonderful to cross.
Yeah.
You only have to cross 2 quick lanes, you can wait in the middle, some pedestrian island. Is there any possibility of putting a pedestrian island in the middle of Rainier at some of those key points that would slow the traffic a bit there, but also make it so much more comfortable for people to cross?
We have some ambitious proposals within urban design framework, and so do check those out. I think they would significantly help crossing in really all directions of the neighborhood.
On that same subject, I glanced at the cross-section of the street that's
Yeah.
suggested in the urban design framework. But how does that happen? I mean, that clearly is a city investment, not a private investment.
That's right.
So is there any discussion of actually putting that in?
There is money to assess, to further assess. We did initial assessment just to see if there were no fatal flaws. But SDOT actually has identified money to kind of take it to the next step and see what really would be involved. The reality is funding this kind of thing, making transit work better, making ped work better. There is revenue sources to do that, but I think SDOT just needs to get to a higher number level at this point. And of course, getting the land use zoning changes accomplished would help move that along. That's what I understand. Yeah.
It's me again. I just see Rainier Avenue as our main link, north-south. It moves trucks, it moves buses, it moves cars, and for us to want to put little things there to, you know, it's only the only one. Can you find another avenue? I mean, we're not very wide in our and don't have very many main thoroughfares. And I think I just see that in our little urban village, we want to make Rainier Avenue cute instead of making it, keeping it flowing the traffic. I think you do need you do need that flow of traffic.
Well, you know, you've touched on, I think, a challenge that informs every issue that we deal with in the planning department, and that's mobility versus livability. That's an equation that we're constantly battling. Moving cars swiftly versus improving the livability and walkability of places. I think we try to hit a good mix. I think we try to find a place that still moves vehicles quickly and efficiently, still accommodates truck traffic, but at the same time improves walkability, creates a streetscape that people feel comfortable walking along as opposed to right now, improving connections from light rail to the bus transit center, which is not great now. So again, is it perfect? No, but we did try to strike a balance given all the complicated transportation factors. You know, Rainier is absolutely moves close, I think over 35,000 vehicles a day. MLK at that location is about 18,000 vehicles, so you've got a huge intersection. At the same time, if you look at the kind of surface parking, low-density uses there, you got to think that we could do better, especially since we've got a light rail station right there. So that certainly was a big objective of the plan update. Yeah.
So it looks like from the list, the actual 12-story space you're talking about is basically Lowe's and the Pepsi.
It's just not even Pepsi. It's just the Lowe's.
Just Lowe's.
It's just that's the only area. Everything
so
else
basically
is.
we're looking at trying to create a mixed-use location where Lowe's currently sits.
That's exactly right. But as I say, the Lowe's doesn't actually own that site. They're separate owners. Lowe's leases it. Those owners aren't, at least at this time, interested in doing anything. So to the degree that we're seeing any changes anytime soon, it seems, at least for that site, very unlikely. At the same time, we have a responsibility that when and if that were to happen, that we kind of maximize objectives.
I mean, I look at Sandpoint Way. Sandpoint Way from the University Bridge all the way. I take my grandkids to school.
Yeah.
It moves traffic.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so there are certain avenues that should, even though we don't want the car,
Yeah.
the car does exist, and it moves traffic and it moves people.
Yeah.
And
we actually did, as I said, we made some traffic changes, proposals in the urban design framework, And we actually did, and you can see it referenced in the PDF with the appendix to the report. We actually found ways to speed traffic while still improving the pedestrian conditions in many cases, and also especially improving transit throughput. So, you know, it's not necessarily a silver bullet to this kind of thing, but I think many of us recognize we can certainly do better than the conditions that are there right now. Right now, that's not a particularly desirable configuration for pretty much anybody. So, again, this doesn't mean anything automatically happens, but we're just trying to set the table for a better tomorrow. Yeah.
So I have a question, just a point of clarification.
Yes.
So did I hear you say that next month the city is going to be approving the proposal, which is
They're going to be looking
this,
specifically at the land use proposal.
the zoning?
The zoning, that's right. That's just what they're taking out. But as I say, once that's done, then that does lead the way for a neighborhood design guidelines to kind of flesh out. Zoning is such a crude, rudimentary tool. We really need that next level to make sure that we achieve the objectives of the neighborhood plan update.
So the city council has to take a formal vote on approving this development?
That is exactly right. They'll take a formal vote on that. That's right. Yes, Susan.
So when you talk about mixed use, can we talk about that a little bit? I know that it's
Yeah.
probably down the road, but the chamber and many people here wanted to look at job creation. So is that something we can look at some of these floors? Are we looking at mixed income and housing?
Yeah, we chose Seattle mixed precisely because it sounds like it's mixed, and it does allow that a much better employment residential blend as a neighborhood develops. At the same time, we didn't want to crowd out uses like Pepsi. You know, they're a good employer. They're a good member of the community, and we also don't want to drive out Lowe's necessarily either. We'd like to see that site develop with a higher density, but still maintaining a home improvement use to that site, because they're also a good employer. So, and we, if possible, would like to attract perhaps more commercial uses generally within that area, whether that's a clinic or just an office building. We think that Rainier core, the Mount Baker area, would be very appropriate for that kind of thing. So that's what we're anticipating in the zoning. Obviously, we don't have the authority to say commercial, residential, let's do it here or
Is it
here.
light industrial there? Or
There is some light industrial, with the roofing company there, and obviously the UW Laundry. So those uses can continue. I think that's fine. But if the neighborhood does redevelop, this is kind of a blueprint to achieve that. Yeah.
It shows here the 125 foot at the Mount Baker meetings. They were against the 125. They didn't even care for the 85 foot. And then all of a sudden it was pushed through to 125.
Well, certainly 125 in the Lowe's, that one
Yes,
Lowe's area.
nobody wanted it. A majority did not want that.
Well, I don't know if that's entirely true. I think the other consideration here is that, as we discussed, there are multiple objectives out of this process. And the Planning Commission has made just crystal clear in their objectives that we want to marry with high-capacity transit with
So it doesn't
higher
matter what
capacity.
it doesn't matter.
Then you're going to take the transit place away and put 85 foot. You wanted to get 85 foot in the transit center.
That site could redevelop, that's right, to 85 feet. Mm-hmm.
Has anybody talked to transit?
Yep.
Who?
We're in constant dialogue with them. They don't find that site particularly optimal either. They think it's awkward in its relationship to the light rail station. And we've talked about ways to make it work better, or maybe even relocate it. But of course, that's expensive to do. But I think in their world too, they would like to see a different configuration there, because it's not optimal for them in terms of function.
Where would it be more optimal?
We've talked about different alignments. You know, it's really not a transit center. It's really just a layover center. And so maybe if you could just bring the transit zones right to the front of the light rail station, right there on Rainier, that would be a much better connection than having to go down the street and have an awkward crossing. So that's certainly one option. But of course, you've got the overhead wiring there for the electric trolleys. So all of that's an expensive proposition, which is why we kind of have this suboptimal solution right now.
putting it across the street would just create more traffic jams.
It could.
It would.
Well, we've got the real estate there to put the lane in. Again, I would advise you to look at the UDF and look at the proposal there, because it has some actually pretty radical changes and recommendations on how to make that all work better.
So, as it states, right now, you have MLK, Rainier, and McClellan.
Yes.
They're making a circle right there.
Yeah.
Now you're trying to put them across the way, and
Again,
they're going to be cutting across more streets.
I'm sorry I didn't bring the kind of supplementary documents in big. I would take a look at the website and take a look at the proposals there and how that works. Because, again, the assessment that we had was that it actually speeds up transit through the process and certainly makes for much better connections between transit. But that's just our recommendation.
Maybe so we don't run too long.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lyle, but is there an avenue? I mean, it sounds like some people still have concerns, and
Yeah,
the city council still has yet to vote on it. Is there an avenue for people to still air their concerns?
Absolutely. I'm going to pass this out. This is just the council briefing notice. So if you've got, pass this out. If you've got comments or questions for your council
Sorry,
member.
real quick. Sorry to enter guys' meeting. I just need to know if anyone's driving a gold-colored Honda Odyssey parked in our back parking lot. All right, sounds good. Sorry.
Wait, do you still have seats in it?
Oh, yes, it does.
You can contact your council members up until December 19th. So you've got almost 30 days to contact them, and their contact information is right there. Plus, there's also a map of the proposed zoning.
When you're down the way on Dearborn and Rainier,
Yeah.
there's those huge apartment buildings. Right? They're kind of off. They're not on Rainier Avenue per se. They are.
Oh, are you talking?
Yeah, we had a
That's
good
one
update on
front, that's an art space building.
Art
Those are
space.
both, there's an art space building, also a
Well-
front building right there. Yeah.
No, it's not. There are apartments right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's art
So
space.
there are artists and their families, and then
but they're
also-
tall. They're tall.
They are
You know,
tall.
they're.
Yeah,
What,
like
6
4
stories?
4 stories.
Well,
Four
no,
stories?
Those are about 6, isn't it? NC-64.
Yeah, well, they're 4 tall.
Oh, right, because
stories.
they're loft spaces. That's right.
I know my building.
Yeah. That's an example of NC-65. It's also a little weird there because you're stepping from high down to
There's a
like,
bit
gas
of slope.
stations.
Because they look big to me. They look huge.
I'm going to have a quick question.
Contact me, I'll give you a tour.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I want to give Benjamin the last question.
Excuse me.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
It's all right. You said we're expecting 185,000 population rise, and this is one way of changing the zone to accommodate. Does that mean this is the area that would be more affected in Seattle area, or you just showing us this because it's this neighborhood?
It's just, yeah. In fact,
Is it other projects like this in all other neighborhoods that are saying?
yeah. And in fact, other neighborhoods have at least recently taken much more of the share of new growth. It's been frustrating that Southeast has actually lagged
Well, some of
behind.
them, look at Ballard. Look at Queen Anne. They're huge.
They're-
We're not that big.
There, and the area here is much smaller too. We really are just talking about, the areas on either side of North Rainier. It's a much more limited area, but it's also got, a regional transit facility, and so that adds to I think that just adds to the complexity in the discussion. But clearly we'll be having more as we move forward. Susan, I'll give you the final word. How about that?
Okay, so it sounds like, yes, we're moving ahead a little bit on the idea of moving the transfer center, just
Yeah.
that there's conversation, that's we like that. I like that. And also from here, if we're raising where the transit center is now, the transfer center, to 85,
Right.
then that's even more reason that it would move because we're gonna.
An incentive. Now, that having been said, the zoning there has been 65 for, gosh, how many, 20 years? And we've not seen radical changes. So I think the important point here is that just because we change the height doesn't mean we'll necessarily see radical
But
difference.
It was changed 10 years ago.
Change it for a reason.
It was changed 10 years ago, anticipation of light rail.
But I think
10
it was
years ago.
Commercial use before that, it was a C use of a similar height. I think it was some similar height, then it went to an NC of a similar height, and now it's going up.
No, the heights are raised in that plan. I'd be happy to share that with you if you can't find it.
Here's what, did we see anything? No. So it's now 20 years. I mean, yeah.
But while part of the problem is the reasons why development is not happening there, and the problem with the way the city's approach to planning is they're not addressing the fundamental problems that are discouraging development from occurring, and that's kind of the problem that we've got here is there's a little bit of the cart in front of the horse, and too much emphasis is being placed on the wrong problems or addressing the issues that are really preventing and that need to be resolved before a serious look at heavy redevelopment in that area.
Are you talking about the general area or the site-specific issues?
Well, I think it's happening within the Rainier Valley in general, but in specific, the Mount Baker, the whole town center concept, until the basic redesign of the infrastructure and the recommitment, developers are not going to make commitments, and so and we may actually even be doing something, development that is occurring may actually be making it more difficult because it starts to create additional impediments to the redesign of the whole area. And I think that's the part that people are a little disappointed about from a development point of view, is that we're not really addressing the real issue of the transit corridors and the roads and all that. And at some point, you're sort of forcing a rezoning that's not really addressing the fundamental issues that need to be looked at.
I absolutely agree. As I say, the rezoning, my thinking is necessary but far from sufficient, and in fact, these other capital improvements really need to come perhaps first before you get the rest of this. And it is a challenge.
Okay, on that note, maybe we should move on.
Great.
So I got some things to talk about.
Okay, your announcements, good.
Okay,
That's the next.
Yeah, go to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lyle.